Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Evan Phillips, your host here at the Firn Line. So this season 6, we've been going back in time, unlocking the history of some of North America's most iconic, amazing mountains and routes. I hope that you've enjoyed the episodes I've put out so far. So far, we've done some deep dives into the Emperor Face on Mount Robson in the Canadian Rockies, and most recently, the northwest face of Forbidden Peak in the North Cascades. I love making those episodes. Obviously, there's a ton of work that goes into those, lots of interviews with different people, but I just love being able to go back in time to talk about the history of climbing. I'm just fascinated with it. I've always been fascinated with it. And I think a lot of it has to do with, it's just how I was inspired when I was younger and got into climbing. Those are nostalgic memories for me. So I really hope that you've all been enjoying those episodes. And we've got some more deep dives coming out this season. But today, it's Alaska Range season. It's Denali season. This is when tons of climbers make the pilgrimage to Alaska to go climbing, usually in the Alaska Range. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So recently I had a conversation with Suzanna Lourie. She's a climber and guide based out of Ouray, Colorado. So in late April, she flew into the Alaska Range with her partner, Olga Dobranowski, and they climbed the Moose's Tooth via what's probably the most classic line these days, ham and eggs. I wanted to chat with her about the climb. It was her first trip into the Alaska Range, so this is going to be kind of one of those trip reports. We're just going to have a conversation, and I hope you all enjoy it.
Yeah, my name's Suzanna Lourie, and I live in Ouray, Colorado. I'm a mountain guide and been kind of climbing and guiding for about 5 years. I used to do non-technical stuff, wilderness therapy guiding, and then moved to Ouray and discovered ice climbing, which has been my real passion. Just kind of fell in love with that, and have been pretty devoted to becoming a guide and taking courses, doing AMGA kind of stuff, getting professionally and personally better at all the things. And I guide here in the winter and sometimes summer, but also the last 2 years going to the North Cascades in the summer to get more experience on glaciers. And I kind of came into it all because I was a big runner and backpacker, and eventually couldn't really go further without needing to learn how to use a rope. But sort of newer to everything, climbing since like 2017, not that long.
Well, it seems like it's something you're into and something that you're pretty good at, because it seems like you've gotten to be a pretty good climber pretty quickly.
Yeah, I don't feel very good compared to all the people around me, but I'm definitely better on ice and snow than straight up rock climbing, but I'm working on it.
Yeah. I always think it's interesting when I chat with people who kind of first get into climbing through ice climbing. It was actually the same thing that happened to me in Alaska when I was like 17. I did like a glacier travel course, and then I got into ice climbing, and I was a way better ice climber. I mean, it took me years to even be able to lead like 5'8" or 5'9". I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
Like I would be leading water ice 5.
Ice climbing's easy. It's the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can say it's easy, but like I think a lot of people who might have started out rock climbing might feel the same way. It's just like a different mindset thing. It's like there's so many different things going on ice climbing than rock climbing.
Yeah. And you kind of learn not to fall. And so then on rock, I don't want to know how to fall. I don't want to fall. And that kind of keeps me from getting much better.
Yeah. I mean,
that's totally different.
That is totally the thing. Like even though people do take falls on ice, like you really shouldn't fall ice climbing.
Yeah, I hope I never do.
Yeah. Well, it seems like if you're going to be out leading these like wicked pillars and stuff, I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's definitely dangerous, but I love it.
Yeah.
I like climbing on jugs.
Yeah, for sure. So the trip that you just did to Alaska, did you mention that was the first time you've been to Alaska?
Yeah, I kind of made a point after last year. I mean, there's a pilgrimage of people from Ouray who go to Talkeetna to go to the range every spring, and I've been wanting to go. Just trying to find someone to like take me as an apprentice, and just hadn't really happened. So I said this year, no matter what, I'm gonna go on a personal trip, and so I did, and I'm glad I did. But yeah, it's definitely not an easy logistics. Takes some work, but first time, and yeah, we did it.
Yeah, for sure. And then tell me about why did you want to come to Alaska? Like what is it that you were looking for just kind of as an overall experience?
um, Alaska has always sort of symbolized, I think, just probably starting with like Into the Wild, a story I'd heard growing up. My dad is an adventure author, like a nonfiction travel writer, and my dad has actually spent a lot of time in Alaska, mostly near the Barrow and the Brooks Range, and he works with the National Science Foundation and writes these books. And he was going up there and interviewing. His website's arcticstories.net, but he interviewed a lot of people about just how climate change has been affecting them over the years. And yeah, so Alaska's always just struck. He wrote a book about Jack London. Like, it's just always carried this allure of adventure. And so it's always been in my mind. And then I guess when I started to climb, you see ski films, and you see all the crazy snow corniced ridges and these mountains that look just wild and unlike anything I've ever climbed in, and you can't really help it but just want to go explore and have some of that adventure for yourself. You don't just big mountains, I guess. I don't think I actually realized how big they were until I was flying in, but yeah, adventure, and the whole kind of place has a mystique about it.
Yeah. So like what made you choose climbing the Moose's Tooth?
Mostly because I have a handful of friends, including one guide named Elias Martos, who's like a Spanish guy, lives in Uray, and he's guided the Moose's Tooth ham and eggs 21 times.
Wow.
So the most anybody's ever. I mean, the people at TIT are like, he's tight with them. They said no one goes in there more to guide, and he was a good friend and mentor ice climbing in Uray, and just kind of put it on my radar as seemed like really just the quintessential alpine climb, like not that hard to get to, so that makes it feel more accessible as a first route. Yeah, snow, ice mixed, a summit, the ridges, kind of just seemed like the natural choice. It's kind of crazy how many people from Uray actually go up there and climb that thing every year, so it's
Yeah.
just on the radar.
Yeah. So who was the team that you went in there with to climb?
I went with a woman named Olga. I'm gonna butcher her last name, Dabrowski. Like, she's Polish, and lives in the Front Range. And actually, wasn't my original. I had originally planned with a different partner, and so this was a bit of a last minute that fell through. And Olga is somebody I had met out in the backcountry near Silverton early season on an ice climb, and didn't know her super well, but had mutual friends, and we connected. And she was available and psyched, and had always wanted to have the same kind of aspirations as I did. And she's a great ice climber and climber all around, and Polish mountain, yeah, just
Yeah.
strong,
Yeah, yeah.
and had a lot of experience. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, the stars aligned for that, for sure.
Yeah, and that's oftentimes for alpine climbing, that's really what it takes is some sort of stars to align in one way or another.
Hmm.
So, when you first flew in, what was your first like what was going through your mind when you start going up there and you see these beautiful mountains? Like how did that feel for you?
Yeah, it's I've been kind of wondering, or like, I'm like, how can I describe that? It's the main phrase that I keep coming back to is it felt kind of like virtual reality. Like you're flying, like almost, going sideways, like 10 feet away. What it feels like you can just reach out and touch these big, like, ridges of snow and these massive seracs, and you feel so small, and you just kind of realize the scale. And you see, avalanches, and the glaciers are they make the ones in the Pacific Northwest look like nothing. You just feel small. And I think I felt like it was fake. I felt like I was in some sort of video game. And it was, yeah, it was a really surreal kind of experience. And then, yeah, they just land you right there and just like pretty incredible. Felt small for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and you did a really that's a really interesting way of describing it, like virtual reality. But it's like eh,
Not that I've ever done virtual, I don't even know what virtual reality is. But
but it really is like I think it's really hard to comprehend like the scale of a place like that or the Alaska Range or Denali or any of those peaks like you think that you've been around like big gnarly mountains, but then when you go to a place like that, it's very eye-opening.
yeah, and the elevation doesn't really matter. Like I live at the same elevation. I live at like almost 8,000 feet, but you know that it doesn't. It's totally different, and so yeah, they might. And the scale is even hard to comprehend. Still, I think like looking at Mount Dickey and trying to comprehended as a actual climb, it's hard to fathom. Or even just looking up at, you know, even the Moose's Tooth, you're like, that's not that tall. And but I mean it is, and you can't like underestimate that. I think I learned that yeah, the scale is always greater than what you think too.
Right. Right. How would you describe the route like ham and eggs? Like if you were going to try and like entice a climber to go climb it, how would you like describe it and like how would you try and get them enthusiastic about it?
I would say, well, I mean, most climbers like the short approach,
Yeah.
so that doesn't hurt. And you know, it's for better or worse. I think that place, that route, probably gets a lot of trap. We got so lucky; we were the only people on it that day, which made it feel much more wild. I think that's fairly uncommon. But I would tell people that it's just it's classic Alpine. It's like one of the perfect Alpine routes. You've got, you know, snow, you've got some rock, you've got mixed, and you've got ice, you've got a bit of everything, and then it just keeps going, and it's very engaging. It's I don't think any of the climbing felt too monotonous. It wasn't like snow, snow. I mean, actually, we went and did Shaken, Not Stirred a couple days later, and that route was in condition where it was pretty much all snow. So it wasn't as fun. I feel like Ham and Eggs had a little bit of everything to keep you on your toes. And I would tell people when, you know, once you get to the ridge, I mean, that's like your classic Alaska summit, like the thing that you see in movies, people walking on the Cornice Ridge line, like something you always kind of have wanted to do, and that feels wild and incredible and yeah, exhilarating. I maybe I'm struggling for the right words. I would just tell people that it's awesome. And it's a good test. Like it's a good, people maybe think that route is a little, I think it gets underestimated, but it's going to take even a strong party all day, if you're climbing it with ropes or you know, and so like a good test to endurance and stamina and kind of how moving fast. And I like that kind of thing personally. Maybe not everyone does.
Awesome. Well, let's take a short break here. And when we come back, let's talk a little bit about the actual climbing on the route. Why don't you go ahead and just kind of walk me up the climb? And I like what I'm just kind of looking for is essentially like a route description and for you just to kind of talk about your experience and talk about the climbing.
Yeah, gosh, we left camp at I think it was probably around 6 a.m. We were making coffee actually and saw some headlamps getting off the route at like 5 in the morning. I guess they were finishing from the previous day. Um, and so that was like slightly intimidating, you know, like, wow, I hope we're not out there for 24 hours. But we walked across the glacier and up, kind of gained the steep snow slope and walked up to the base of the first pitch, which is a kind of like 5, 6 easy rock mixed step. I mean, the route's in really good condition right now, so I think some of these pitches can be a little more challenging if there's less snow. But it was pretty straightforward. I think I put one or two cams, and then we popped around the corner, kind of getting into the couloir, and it looked like just several pitches of snow above us, and it was still pretty early. Like the sun is rising, the mountains are all glowing and beautiful, and we decided to put our ropes away for a couple of pitches. And yeah, it was just cold. There was nothing coming down. It felt reasonable. So we soloed up for a few pitches. There was actually, I think it's on the third pitch, but like a step of fairly rotten ice. And I remember swinging into it and kind of being like, okay, this isn't Uray water ice. This is like Alaska Alpine ice, and it's kind of weird. And it was a kind of a steep step. It was like, yeah, okay, this is my first time swinging into Alaska Alpine ice, and I decided to put the rope away. That was maybe dumb, but it was fairly short, and yeah, we managed just fine. And then went up some more snow till I think we put the ropes back on at the crux there, and Olga led that crux pitch of ice that it's probably like 60 feet. It's different, just like getting to know what the ice is like there, for someone who just climbs like fat waterfall ice mostly. It was like a learning experience. Some of the ice is bullet hard, there's some is sticky, some is rotten, and then like this concept of neve, which is incredibly fun. Uh, as long as it's not, as long as you don't really need to protect it. And so there was more of that above, and we just kind of kept moving up through. It gets narrow. We simuled a few blocks up there, and we're just moving, and it's tiring. That kind of snow climbing. So we were definitely, taking some rests and breathing, but trying to move as efficiently as possible. And then eventually got up to the call, and it was getting really windy. So we took like a short break, but we didn't really stop very much, and got out onto the summit ridge. And those pitches were wild. Just all of a sudden it dropped like 20 degrees in temperature, and it was really windy, and so it was very cold climbing in like our big puffy jackets and on this traversing snow that gets really wind affected, and these ripples of, we had the rope on, but there was like maddening. The rope just gets caught on these ripples of snow, like these fins. And so it took some time just getting through those pitches, up to the, where you actually get onto like the Cornice Ridge. I think it's called the, I don't know, there's a big rock. And but those pitches were really cool and engaging, and you're back on glacier. So you've got some crevasses around you, and yeah, and then we got to the final stretch where we did take ropes off because it was, the ropes were getting blown and just caught on all that snow and kind of like just creating a little more hazard. So we walked up the last few pitches and kind of reveled in the views for not terribly long, but yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to do the route to the summit?
I think it was about 8 to 9 hours, which I guess in hindsight feels a little slow, but felt like we were moving the whole time. I think there was some transitions that took a minute, and just trying to read the route and make sure we knew where anchors were for coming down. Probably about 8 hours, 8.5.
And yeah, and then how do you get down, and how long did the descent take?
The descent took, see, we did our, I've got to do some very simple math. It took us like 13 and a half hours total. So the descent took about 4 to 5. I think we did it pretty smoothly getting off of the, like we down climbed the first like snowy ridge part, and then we roped back up, and you're doing these like traversing rappels on, this ridge of snow, where if the rope kind of gets blown down, you could be screwed, but it's all traversing and just challenging rappels. I'd say those first few, getting down back to the notch, took some time. Our friend Elias, who guides it a lot, has left like fixed pickets and kind of set it all up for a 70-meter rope descent. So those were really helpful. He has a fixed thread and a couple fixed pickets, but it's not the rope management, especially on a windy day like that, was just time consuming. But once we got back to the call, it was a lot more straightforward. There are a lot of anchors on that thing, so we didn't nail it. We didn't go anchor to anchor all the time, but pretty efficient. We were using half ropes. And yeah, for the most part, nailing it. But a couple times, like we would, we're like, oh, this is too short. Let's go further and see if there's another anchor. And there wouldn't be. But in those cases, it was either could go right back up or we could down climb to the next anchor. But definitely a little bit of trickiness with finding the exact right descent route. I suppose there's no real right way, but some of the anchors are better than others.
Yeah. So you descend the way you came up, basically. You descend the route.
Yeah. Hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, the anchors are for the most part on the other side as like what you're climbing. But yeah. Yeah, really straightforward. I mean, as straightforward I think as any descent could be. Even
I think, yeah, it's funny. I think I started climbing in 1993, aging myself here. But so it was a while ago. But I remember kind of it was then in the early 90s and mid 90s when I started hearing about people doing it. I feel like I
Yeah.
remember reading in Climbing Magazine, like Ham and Eggs gets like second ascent or
Yeah.
something. And then it just turned into like this mega classic.
As soon as they started landing people on the root canal, I mean, it changed because the classic way to get up there was to go through the ice fall and be camped on the Ruth Gorge. And
Right.
so I think that people started landing up there around that time. And yeah, it's gotten incredibly classic. And I think we really dodged a bullet. I mean, some of my friends who were up there this year, they were like 5 parties en route, it seems incredibly popular, which yeah, in a funnel like that, doesn't sound as much fun to
No,
me.
no.
Luckily, that route has these spots where, yeah, like wide spots where you can kind of wait, but I'm glad we didn't have to deal with that.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you had a unique experience up there that made it honestly just a really great experience for you and your partner.
Yeah, it really couldn't have been more optimal. It was pretty perfect. And yeah, definitely only good things.
Yeah. So when you got down and to the tent and you're like relaxing and you kind of have that feeling, that glowy feeling, did you feel like a badass?
I don't know. I don't like often feel like I felt happy.
Yeah,
Yeah. I don't know about badass, but I
yeah,
felt happy.
yeah,
Um, and tired and
yeah,
just psyched. Really like, and feel lucky that we were kind of granted that safe passage and, yeah, just that we got such a special experience, being out there alone and yeah, worked well together as a team. Like we hadn't really climbed together. We had one day in Eldo, like rock climbing right before we left, but outside of that was our first climb together. So I was relieved and happy and excited. Yeah.
yeah. I don't think that there's a better feeling than like that kind of feeling that you get of like doing a really, a long day, a hard, challenging route in a beautiful environment like that. That feeling when you get back down to the tent and it's just like, oh man, we just get to like relax and enjoy those memories. And that's just like the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, it's like sunny and beautiful when you get back. You can draw your stuff out and
Yeah.
yeah, it didn't feel it's one of those routes that it didn't feel particularly technically hard, but I think the like just all of it cumulatively,
Yeah.
with the amounts of snow climbing in between, and like it absolutely was tiring. And I'm someone who probably doesn't drink or eat enough, and so en route, and you definitely feel it. So yeah, it was a great feeling to get back, and I definitely felt worked.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I don't think that I had known that you had climbed Shaken Not Stirred as well. So it sounds like you had a really nice stretch of weather and the conditions were good. And so you both decided to go climb that as well.
Yeah, we took one rest day, which kind of worked out perfectly. It was a tiny bit of weather, just cloudy and like light snow on our day of rest. So we took that one day to just recover, and then it was perfect and sunny again day after. And so yeah, we climbed Shaken. We had heard from some people around camp that it was like it was in really good shape, but it was such a sick ice climb, like way more ice than ham and eggs. And so we were excited about that, but it kind of it didn't really turn out that way. We casually started and kind of traversed into the couloir for Shaken on this, which took some time. That's like 5'8", kind of traversy rock, snow-covered rock that I didn't really realize you could start at the bottom. So we took our time getting in there, and then it was mostly that route was it was mostly snow. So we were both kind of just trudging up this unconsolidated snow, like waiting for the epic ice climb to present itself, and it didn't really happen. And then we kind of got to the narrows pitch and hadn't placed a single screw, and I was like, "Oh, I think that's the crux," and she was like, "No way!" And but it was, and that pitch was. I took that pitch, and it was awesome, and I placed some screws, none of which were very good, but it was that pitch. That pitch was really cool. Definitely more technical and challenging than what we had experienced on ham and eggs. We were tired too, so we turned around after the crux. It was starting to warm up, and we didn't want to be in there in the late afternoon.
Yeah, I mean that's something to think about too. Like when you're in there, it's like you guys had, you can kind of downplay it and be like, oh yeah, ham and eggs, it's pretty easy. But it's like that's like you really get worked doing climbs like that and being in that kind of
Yeah.
environment. And it's not just the physical stress; it's also all of the mental preparation of like all the planning that you did going into that trip. All of that stuff
hmm
is combined. It all kind of is like a cumulative effect. So I think that that's a good lesson for people to hear that it's like, hey, man, at the end of the day, this should be about having fun and it should be about keeping yourself safe. And you guys went up there and it sounds like you did the climbing you wanted to do and you're like, let's go down.
Yeah, exactly. I think it would have been like 3 or 4 more pitches to get to the top of the technically the route, like the call, the Englishman's call. But the way that the conditions it was in is just snow slogging, and we were definitely tired. We did the cool technical pitch, and yeah, it was only going to get hot, and stuff was going to start. I mean, people get buried in wet, loose stuff in that couloir, especially more than it's got more objective hazard, I would say, I think, than ham and eggs does. And yeah, we went down, and we had a bit of an epic getting down. We core shot one of our ropes actually at the end, so that took some time. But yeah, it's tiring. I think I greatly underestimated how exhausting 7 days of good weather would be. I was like, of course, it's just good weather. I mean, you climb, because after that, we bumped over to base camp and climbed most of, well, about half of the mini moonflower. So, and by then, I mean, it was just my calves like couldn't take it.
Yeah. Wow, that's man, yeah, you guys were really getting after it.
We were trying, yeah, but it's tiring. That was the maximum I think I couldn't have climbed. We bailed right before the crux on the mini moonflower, and I don't think I could have gone on even if it had been good weather. I
Yeah.
was so tired.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so it sounds like your first trip to Alaska was really just magical in a lot of ways. And what do you think are the most important lessons that you've learned? I would just say maybe about yourself, but also as an alpinist, because it seems like you're on a path. I have a feeling you're going to be doing more alpinism, and I'm just kind of curious to hear like what the big lessons have been for you. What have you learned about yourself, and what have you learned about alpinism?
Yeah, I think I've always been sort of hesitant to use this term for myself, but I think like calling myself an alpinist, I feel more qualified to say that now. And just that I think what I learned about myself is that I'm, I think, stronger, more capable than I think I am. And that's maybe really cliche and cheesy, but I'm like, I don't know, I can lead Water Race 5 like on a good day here, but I don't really want to call myself a Water Race 5 leader. And then, I was able to lead that Crux Unshaken, which is like 5, and feel, yeah, and kind of sketchy, not well protected, and feel like it was well within my skill set. And I had been just kind of conservative with my entire approach to Alaska, like not wanting to get in over my head or push myself. And so wanting to climb things that were well, within my technical ability. And I think I learned that with the right partner and good weather and conditions, I'm able to kind of step up or out of that now, having a little experience in the range, and that felt good. Just like, okay, like I actually am meant to be here. I'm not like a complete imposter. I am like capable of getting up these climbs, making good decisions, and that these are the real mountains. And no matter what preconceived notions you might have of a route like Ham and Eggs that gets a lot of traffic or is guided a lot, like it's still the real deal and still has hazard, and you can still spend 24 hours on that route like we saw, or just stuff can happen, and it's not to be taken lightly. And just like those mountains are, I think, deserve respect. And also just learned that it's taxing and consider myself relatively strong, but to listen to your body, and there's no need to push it past what feels, right, I guess.
Do you think that you're going to be heading back to Alaska next season, or would you like to do some more alpine climbing in Alaska?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've been talking about, getting, cash up there. And yeah, I would like to do some more climbing up there for sure. Actually, this first trip of mine was a prep trip for, I did a second trip, like shadow guiding a friend of mine for skyward mountaineering, and we were supposed to do 11.3, but that's when the weather fell apart. So we didn't end up climbing anything. But next year I would like to do, yeah, some routes like that, like overnight, carrying your pack up and over type things, ultimately to try to get on something like the Harvard or the Cassine in the next couple of years. I definitely don't want to jump into something like that without, I don't know, maybe 11.3 first. And yeah, I'd like to spend a lot more time there.
Well, it sounds like you have a really wise, smart, and patient approach. You're setting realistic goals for yourself, and I think that that's super important.
Yeah.
I think it's super important to allow yourself as a mountaineer time to like really learn how to do things the right way. And it's like, for example, like this first trip, I mean, you know better than anyone. You guys scored with the weather and conditions.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
rare. Like that
absolutely.
doesn't happen all the time. And it's like, it'll probably be good for you to have more experiences where maybe you get up on something and you get pounded by weather and you have to kind of figure out what that's like and learn how to manage that. And
Hmm.
you talk about getting yourself into a situation when it's the real deal. Like if you're halfway up the Cassine and the weather comes in, that's very, very serious. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, yeah, I'm sure that will happen inevitably. We'll, in my career, I'm sure weather will come in and it'll be it'll be terrible and suffering.
yeah,
And I think like it's definitely cold out there, and I think it was good to figure out how I managed the cold, just like with a base camp and on a route in nice conditions, and we had little bits of weather, but I'm sure it will get real one of these days, and hopefully when that time comes, I'll be prepared for it.
yeah, I think you will. I think the last question I want to ask you is, like what, I hate to use the term advice, but like, like what could you tell someone who's like maybe wanting to go in and do a route like Ham and Eggs? Like, what would your kind of wisdom, like biggest suggestions be, just as far as how to approach that climb?
Yeah, I think I would encourage people to focus more on like endurance and uphill fitness and things like that over, for me, I was sort of like, oh, I got to get better at mixed climbing. And I was going mixed climbing up here in Uray, and it's like, that's way harder and different than what, the technical stuff. If it's like, if you're at that level, should probably be pretty easy for most climbers. Like if you're in that, I don't know, M5, M6, kind of water ice 4 range, and like focus a little more on the long days and the stamina and maybe like calf raises or something. But just, yeah. And like kind of how do you manage yourself on hour, 13, and do you have enough food, water to make good decisions? And I don't know, I think it depends on the person, but that's like a nice entry level route because you can bail, and just like telling people to, yeah, be honest with themselves. If weather's coming in, if they're not feeling great, like you can always turn around and it's still going to be there, maybe in different conditions. But I think that the like fitness and endurance piece of it is something that I could have potentially like trained more if we're just talking about actual preparation. Yeah.
All right, well, thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope you got as much out of Suzanna's stories as I did, and I hope you can apply some of her alpine wisdom to your next trip in the mountains. If you want to check out some accompanying photos of this trip report, you can find those over at thefirnline.com. And you can also follow Suzanna over on Instagram at Suzanna.Lourie. This episode was produced by me, Evan Phillips, music curated from Artlist. If you'd like to support the work I do here at the Firn Line, I'd encourage you to become a member over on Patreon. Head on over to patreon.com/thefernline, or you can find links over at thefernline.com. Also, please give a review over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember, the Firn Line now has a YouTube channel. Head on over to YouTube, search the Firn Line, where you can find full episodes plus bonus clips. All right, well, take care of yourselves. Peace out. We'll catch you next time on the Firn Line.